Hey, welcome back. It's best-selling author, coach, and small business specialist, Alex Goad. And today we're going to continue talking about 10xing your life with one of the most important factors of all, which is crystal fractal clarity. And here's how this is going to work. So, I have drawn on this board, more accurately, my girlfriend has drawn on this board, a prism. And this prism goes from the biggest, widest picture far away, your big, bright future, to the structure for your everyday so that you can make the maximum amount of progress and get, in record time, disproportionate results, far beyond average. So we're going to start here at the top and we're going to work our way down, and at just about every level I'm going to give you some tips or secrets that literally change the game for me. And I hope that they'll do the same thing for you. So, the first step is the bigger and brighter future. And this for me was the least intuitive step, because I'm talking about basically drawing up a future for yourself about 25 years down the line. Depending on your age, where you're at in life, you may want to make it a little shorter, a little bit longer, but I would say 25 years is just about the ideal place to create a bigger and brighter future. It's far enough down the line that really anything can happen if you put your mind to it, and it also allows you to set targets that are neither too specific nor so vague that they don't have any value. Now, I went over the bigger and brighter future in more detail in the last video, so I highly recommend, if you haven't watched that, go back and watch it now. And first of all, the whole thing's a good video, but at the end you're going to see that I show you the 6 spheres of life in which you really do need to have some kind of target into the future so that you can decide as you navigate through every day what's right and what's going to lead you towards having that future and what's leading you away from it or what's a bad choice. So that's really the point of the 25-year goal, is to have enough kind of guideposts or guidelines so that your activities, your thoughts, your associations, your choices in terms of career, in terms of the people that you welcome into your life, are congruent with getting eventually the things that you really want. So I'm not going to spend more time on it, but the point of this prism is to show that the more the different layers of the prism are perfectly aligned with one another, the more you have fractal clarity. If your activities on a daily basis are perfectly representative of the big, bright future that you want 25 years down the line, it's going to happen for sure, and it's going to happen even sooner. And the same thing is true at every level of this inverted pyramid. So the second level on the prism is the 2 or 3 year targets. And I've chosen 2 or 3 years as a very specific number because in my experience, and as my research shows as well, 2 to 3 years is the approximate amount of time where you can get staggering, incredible results in just about any sphere of your life. Of course, in order to do that, you need disproportionate focus on that one sphere. But somehow, most people, and this is true, most people overestimate what you can get done in 1 year, but underestimate what you can get done in 3. So what I found is that when I give myself these 2 or 3 year targets and I think about it every day and I really focus on it, generally I can make it happen in approximately that time frame. If I aim for something gigantic and I try to do it faster than that, often it doesn't work quite as well, or it kind of falls apart. And if you make it so far down the line, then it starts to lose contact with daily reality, and it starts to make it kind of vague and vaporous, and it makes it harder for you to consistently take action and consistently course correct towards this one thing that you want. So 2 or 3 years is a wonderful time span to use in order to reach really big goals. So, what have I got covered up here? I put an S here. I put the S to tease you. Because here's one of the things that the average performer and the normal person can't wrap their mind around. They can't wrap their mind around the fact that for 2 or 3 years you're going to disproportionately focus on one thing. So they want targets. This is what I've noticed. So I've told you before, I've coached probably hundreds of thousands of people by now, at least tens of thousands. And here's the thing that I can tell you. I've seen people that have very high levels of skills and abilities, and they don't get anywhere. And I can tell from the first day when I have the initial interview with these people that unless they dramatically change their way of operation, they're never going to really get anywhere. Why? Because they've got 4, 5, 6 really big goals in their mind that they're working towards at the same time. And in my experience, that is just flat out impossible. How could you get in the best shape of your life and build a wonderful business and change careers and change your level of health and change all your relationships all at once in a short period of time? It's not possible. What is possible is to disproportionately focus on one thing. There's a really good book on this topic by, I believe it's Gary Keller. And the name of the book is, I believe, if I remember correctly, One Thing. And the idea is that in every time period and in everything that you do in your life, there's one thing that you can do that will help make all of the other things happen. Let me give you an example. In your bigger and brighter future, let's say in your bigger and brighter future, you want to have a beautiful mansion by the mountain, you want to have a great spouse, you want to have wonderful children, and you want to send those children to private education schools that are going to give them the best chance to do exactly what they want out of life and get paid well for it. And I could add a whole bunch of other things like that, like lifestyle. Like, for example, maybe you want to take 6, 8, 10 weeks of vacation a year. Well, what are the things? If you have too many goals and if you try to work towards all of those goals at the same time, you probably get lost. And you know what? Here's my prediction. You get none of it. None. The way that you get all of it, though, is if you start by focusing on your career and the thing that you do, your occupation, whereby you transform your time and energy into value for others, into money for yourself, and into the freedom to do anything that you want with your life. You know, if you're highly successful in your career and in seizing your opportunities, then everything else in life is just a series of opportunities. And when you've got the money, the time, the health, the energy to do it, there's really nothing stopping you. So, in every one of these things, there is always one thing that you can do that makes all of the rest happen, or at least tows all of your other objectives forward with it as you do it. And so, the most natural and logical thing to do is to disproportionately focus on that one thing. So have a 2 or 3 year target. Forget the S. The more different things you want, the less likely you'll have any of them. All right, the next level is projects. So here's how this works. You have your big, bright future, and then within that big, bright future, you cut it into chunks of 2 or 3 years. Obviously, the 2 or 3 years that are coming up right now. Then, in those 2 or 3 years, you have this one thing that you want to accomplish. In order to accomplish that one thing, you should be working in a series of projects that have a beginning and an end. And they have goals and they have clearly defined outcomes so that you can know when you're done, when you're not done, when you need to change what you're doing. And so projects, your projects have to fit within this target right here. And I recommend that you have projects that last between 1 and 6 months. And what you'll see is that that's another time duration where, because life really functions in oscillation or cycles, whereby, for example, you can work really hard for a couple of months and then you can take a break and then you can come back to it and do it again. So projects, the intermediate step. Finally, you've got the week. Not finally, but almost finally. You've got the week. So this is where the stuff gets really serious. And this is where disproportionate focus on one thing is going to be absolutely critical once again. So the way that I manage having really great, extraordinarily productive weeks that bring me closer to my really important goals is with a tool that I call the top 5 and must. The M stands for must. Okay, so most people either don't have a list of the important things that they want to do this week. And out of the people that do have a list, most of them have a to-do list. And it's got a whole bunch of stuff on it. And now out of those people that have a to-do list, so few of them have ordered the things that they need to do in terms of priority, in terms of what's really important and what's not that important. So, here's what I'm going to recommend to you right now, is forget about having a to-do list. That's good for getting little things done at the end of the day. But if you want to get disproportionate results, the trivial can never take precedence over the essential, over the important. And so you always have to have incredible clarity about what's your one thing this week, one thing today, one thing as a project, as a target for multiple year goals. Okay, so here's how I recommend that you do it. You write down in outcome-oriented format the 5 things that you want to get done this week. And they're in declining order of importance. So number 1 is the most important, number 5 is the least important. And finally, there's one more condition, which is that the number 1 is a must. So the number 1 thing that you write down on that list is an outcome that you're going to create this week, and it is a must. Meaning that if you have to scrap everything else on your list, and you have to work extra long hours, and you have to work on weekends in order to get it done, that's what you're going to do. You're never going to do number 5 before you do the must, because if you do that, what happens a lot of the time is that you start to major and minor things. You want to keep the main thing the main thing. It's the most important success factor in all of this clarity, all of this output. Keep the main thing the main thing. So if you have one thing in your week that's a must, sometimes it's going to feel ridiculous. Sometimes it's going to feel like that thing's going to take you 2 or 3 hours. And yet, I'll tell you what, if every single week you get just your most important item done in terms of creating your bigger and brighter future, in terms of reaching your 2 and 3 year targets, in terms of completing your projects, you're going to make significant progress. Or, in the opposite, and this is what so many people do, is they'll check off 100 to-dos every week, but they'll never check off the one big important thing. And so that thing always stays on the back burner. No progress is ever made. And what the result is that people feel overwhelmed because they're constantly busy, constantly knocking things out, constantly making lists and checking things off, but nothing really gets done. Nothing of significance gets done. That's why clarity is so darn important. Let's move on to the day level. So here's how I make sure that I get done every day the most important stuff. So I still use a physical agenda. I like to write things down, and I like to I make little boxes and I check them off. It feels really great to check off important stuff every day. So I create my day's plan, and as I do so, I always set myself 1 to 3 essentials for that day. And as you do this for a long time, you're going to get good. You're going to learn to calibrate yourself. This calibration is going to come in 2 forms. Number 1, you're going to set goals that are achievable for yourself. So you're going to get to know yourself, how you work, how much you're capable of doing, and you're going to develop such a knowledge of accomplishment and achievement that you're going to be able to set goals and reach them just about without too much leeway and without too much stress most of the time. So that's how you're going to become an exceptional achiever. And the way that you do this is every day you have 1 to 3 essentials. And an essential might be something that takes half an hour to do, or an hour and a half. Less is more all the time. In all of these things, the less things you have that are important, the more the things that you do have are priorities, or even a priority. And that is one of the secret powers of clarity, is that really you're working on the absolute leverage point all the time. You've probably heard a million times the Pareto principle, the 80-20, how 20% of activity produces 80% of results. Well, I guess this is what all of this is about. If you can figure out what that 20% is and focus on it disproportionately by having one thing, by making it a must, and by making it your essential piece that you move on the board every day, whoa, the results you're going to get, you're going to be impressed. Last point before we move on is, here's how you get bonus points in this entire process. You make an avoid list. An avoid list is more important than a to-do list. If you figure out all of the stuff that you can safely avoid, you're going to be shocked. When I did this exercise, it blew me away. Because you realize that you're doing all of these things every day because you're trying to please someone that's not even being pleased by what you're doing. You're doing all of these things because you have to, right? And then you realize that actually you don't. You're doing all of these things because it's important. And then you stop doing it and you realize that nothing bad happens. And you also realized that the more you can declutter and get rid of stuff that doesn't serve you well, perhaps of relationships that go against what you really want to get out of life, against hobbies, activities, ways that you use your time, distractions, things that go against what you really want to have. The more you eliminate and get rid of those things, even the ones that just occupy time and space but don't bring benefit, well, that's pretty much the definition of having a great life, is not having all of this stuff that you don't use or don't care about, which includes not using your time, your energy, your money, and your opportunity costs to do all of these things that in the general scheme of things don't matter. So, I recommend it. Make a list. Look at how you occupy your time. Write it down on paper. And then use 3 colored markers and highlight which ones are essential, crucial, which ones are kind of neutral and don't do much for you, and which ones are counterproductive. And put them on the chopping block. Get rid of them. You'll see it's extraordinarily liberating. It fits perfectly into the mindset of Zen and minimalism, and what it will do is it will energize you and it will create all of this time, this space, this intellectual resource and this energy for you to invest in the things that you really want, really care about. Because remember, the average today, the mainstream, nobody gets what they want. Nobody's happy. Nobody has the relationships that they want. Nobody's happy at their job. The level of fulfillment in our society is extraordinarily low. That's the average result. So if you don't do things differently, if you don't use tools, tips, secrets, strategies, associations to make it happen, ain't gonna happen. Well, this is a great one right here. So are most of my previous videos. So are most of my future videos. So if you haven't opted in yet, so that I can email you when I have a new one coming up, I highly recommend you do that right now. You can probably find a link or a box or an opt-in form below this video, so go ahead, add yourself to the list. I would love to continue this process with you. Here's what I'll leave you with. Today is a template for every day. The way you take action today starts to shape your future. The person that you decide to be right now as you watch this video, whether you decide that you're going to do this later, maybe, or you actually pull out a piece of paper and you get to work on it, that's going to make a huge difference. So, the person you are today is the person you're going to bring with you into the future. Behave yourself accordingly. I'm Alex Goad. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.